Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Free Speech Forward podcast. This is an episode that I think is going to be really fascinating because we have such a fascinating guest that we're bringing on to get today. She has such a diverse background and she is a radical, as we will find out the way that all of us today who argue for free speech are radicals. And in the way that Fire, I think, legitimately does point out that free speech is the eternally radical idea. But we're definitely going to get into it today. So I'm going to turn it over to my co-host, co-founder Chris, who will introduce you all to Naya.
Great. Thanks, Joia. And hi, Naya. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. It's exciting and to be a
Yeah.
radical. Yes.
Radical leader for free speech. We use lots of different terms, but we're just happy to have you on our side for sure. And before we dive in, we always like to give a bio on our guests. So for those of you who don't know, we've got Dr. Naya Lekht. She was born in the former Soviet Union and immigrated to the U.S. in 1989. In her work studying the Soviet Union, she has developed a comprehensive approach to understanding the dangerous nexus between leftist totalitarian ideologies and anti-Semitism. Her primary endeavor is as a high school teacher, but she is also a research fellow with the Institute for the Studies of Global Anti-Semitism and Policy. Her writings on anti-Semitism, Marxism, and education have appeared in the Jewish Journal, JNS, Allgemeiner, the Jerusalem Post, Mosaic, White Rose Magazine, and the American Spectator. Wow. So with that, Naya, why don't you just tell us how did you get even started on this path that has now brought you all this great exposure for your ideas? And as we like to call it, how did you become, or were you always a leader for free speech?
Well, thanks again for having me. I don't think I was always a leader for free speech, but I think it's very tied to my personal story, which is that, as you mentioned when you introduced me, I was born in the former Soviet Union. Now, I arrived here when I was very young, about 6 years old. So I cannot claim that I lived in a totalitarian Marxist regime, but my parents did. And I grew up with an acute awareness of that. From an early age, my parents shared their stories of what it meant to grow up not just as Jews, but just as human beings in a country where there was severe censorship, and just to stress, it wasn't, a lot of people think, oh, it was just the Jews who suffer in the Soviet Union. No, everybody suffered
Hmm.
in the Soviet Union. There was a saying in the, I think, 1970s and 80s in Russian. I'm translating it from Russian into English.
Mm-hmm.
That a Jew was a mode of transportation, meaning because Jews were allowed to emigrate, there were these moments in Soviet history where they would open the border and allow Jews to emigrate. There was this kind
Mm.
of saying among the population that if you could just marry a Jew, it was your way out of the Soviet Union. But why I share this is it reveals that everybody wanted out, not just the Jews
Mm.
of the Soviet
Right.
Union. So growing up with that knowledge and inheriting that legacy of my family, growing up, uh, my aunt, for instance, was detained by the KGB for reading the wrong book. Um,
Wow.
so yeah, I have that in my family memory, in our family kind of stories.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't until I went to college that I really encountered the censorship, and I was very, very surprised because America, after all, we immigrated to the land of freedom and opportunity,
Mm-hmm.
and I still very much believe it is the land of freedom and opportunity. That's why I fight for it so vehemently. I love it.
Mm.
What happened was when I went to college, I saw this very strange phenomenon. I thought I came to a place where you had a viewpoint diversity, where there was this marketplace of ideas, and the best ideas would duke it out, and you would then, as a student, get to choose, which idea you want to prescribe to, which position, which ideology. But what ended up happening was that actually it was the opposite. What ended up happening, and this was, I'll date myself, this was right after 9/11, so 2001, 2002. The
Mm-hmm.
president of the time was George W. Bush. And being a conservative, any idea that, let's say, was promoted by the conservative movement was immediately labeled as a right-wing racist Nazi idea. And so that
Mm.
was a very effective way to censor or cancel ideas. This way of just labeling, demonizing, delegitimizing an idea. And
Mm.
what ended up happening is that all of us students suffered because we were then not presented with a diverse viewpoint. We were presented with only a sanctioned viewpoint. And and that's when I became on college campus, I became like a huge activist for freedom of speech.
Mm.
Now it looked like a lot of activism for Israel or against anti-Semitism, but I always understood, and I wanted to say this, is that for me, the fight for anti-Semitism is a fight for America. Anti-Americanism and anti-Semitism are these strange bedfellows.
Mm-hmm.
For me, when I fight against anti-Semitism, the truth is I'm fighting for America, and
Mm.
the America that my parents brought me to, the America that my mom loves, cherishes, that we all cherish, which is this place where anybody can make it. Okay, yeah, there are certain people who have a disadvantage, but this is, it may sound trite, but it is a land of opportunity, and it is a place where there's freedom. And so for me, I want to guard that as much as I can.
Thank you for sharing your story. And I can definitely resonate with this experience of going off to college and university and thinking, finally, I've entered the land where ideas are going to be respected. I'm going to be surrounded by a whole range of different views and viewpoints, and, learning to choose from the diversity of the views, which I want to personally uphold and subscribe to, and then just not having that experience at all. So I'm curious then your answer, since so many people today, don't see the value of free speech. Why would you say free speech is so important so that we can flourish both as individuals and as society as a whole?
Well, think about it. Let's borrow from the model of, let's say, economics and marketplace, right? Where you have, I was just actually last week explaining this to my son. I was explaining to my son what is capitalism and what is this idea of the free market. And the idea of the free market is that not one person or one entity, i.e., the government, gets to have a say into how much production is going to be of certain product. That actually it's the people. It's actually very democratic, right? It's the people who get to decide what they want to buy. And so if we look at the model of, let's say, again, capitalism and free marketplace, you have a product, right? You have a product, and instead of the government saying we're going to create this product and we're going to ration 5,000 of whatever widget, in America, in capitalism, what happens is you've got businesses who are going to say, you know what, I could make this widget better. I could make this product easier. I could make it cheaper. And so what ends up happening for us consumers is that we get to decide what's best. And if we apply that, transfer that rather to free marketplace of ideas, I
Mm.
think we flourish when we are presented with bad ideas and with good ideas. I believe that there's also a place for bad ideas, but because you only know they are bad because there's good ideas, right?
Mm.
Otherwise, you don't know. You only have one idea. Like, remember from the model of the government where you only have one product, one widget that is
Right.
being produced. You have no clue. Is it good? Is it bad? It's the only thing you have. And so it actually makes us, sorry to say this, it makes us less sharp, right? It dumbs us down. And so I do believe that when you are truly entertaining a freedom of ideas, everybody benefits, even at the risk of having bad ideas as part of that marketplace of ideas. Everybody benefits. And then you get to say, okay, well, which idea is going to win out? Which business is going to do it best? Which idea is going to do it best? And that's ultimately, I think that's what makes America so amazing and so very unique. My parents, going back, they didn't have that growing up, right? There were certain books that you couldn't read. There were certain ideas that you couldn't entertain. There was a certain way of understanding history. They learned Marxist history. They learned about historical materialism, which was the way that history evolves. There was only one way that history can evolve.
Yeah.
done through the lens of Marxism. But in America, and I really would hope that we still have that opportunity to look at ideas and to value each idea and say, oh, okay, well, this idea, I like this idea, that's interesting, that idea less so, but that's so important to a vibrant democracy. And so I do think that just as businesses flourish when there's freedom of when capitalism flourishes, same thing with ideas, the capitalist ideas, if you will.
Wonderfully said. And I love how you connected it to the free market of goods and services, because ideas is just one more part of the broader, what we call kind of human creative experience. And just as the competition, the healthy competition that markets creates between producers and traders, makes for better outcomes, so too in ideas, you like you said, you do need the bad ideas to help sharpen the better ideas and to put them in contrast, so that people can compare and contrast and see the benefits. And I think that certainly encouraging even a culture of free speech where clashing ideas can be heard in a civil discourse manner, where it is speech that's clashing rather than bricks and fists, that's how we get to the better ideas. So I'm curious then, to that end, you've been writing for a long time on these issues. You've been activating, I'm sure, in many different forums and media. Do you have any principles that you've kind of induced for yourself as to how you prepare to convey ideas and to stand up for your cause effectively with an audience, or even just with someone on the other side of a table who might be opposed to you, or even not necessarily opposed, but just is unaware of what you're trying to convey?
Okay, well, I'll tell you two things. I think that I'll just say something kind of broad, which is that whenever I embark on speaking or writing about something, I think about what it is that I want to say, and then I think about the marketplace of ideas, and I think, well, what currently exists in the discourse, and then I ask myself, well, how is it what I'm saying or writing contributing to something original or thought-provoking or radical? Of course, I try to have the audience in mind, but I do begin with what is it that I want to say, and then I consider the discourse that exists around it. I also want to say that in my field work of teaching, every year I teach George Orwell's 1984. And before teaching 1984, what I do with my class is I introduce them to different studies that have been conducted on studies where people are presented with information and this idea of group dynamic, of how do you control people? You control people, there are various ways, but one is through group psychology. And there are many tests that have been conducted throughout the 1950s and onward, where you sit a group of people in a row and you show them one line A and then line B. And then you ask them, line A is as long as line B, C, or D, let's say. And what happens, they do this intentionally. They'll have one person say the wrong answer. And what they find is that a lot of time people will repeat the wrong answer because there's this pressure of group dynamics. The reason I teach this to my class is I believe very much in being original and exceptional and extraordinary and daring to stand out. So when I prepare to write something or speak somewhere, I don't only think about what is it that I want to say and how does it contribute to what already exists, but I also think about courage to do something different. And I try to teach that to my students, the courage to get it, to be wrong or to be right, depending on the group dynamic. So that's something, it's very, and I tell my students, I say, a lot of times when I ask you a question to the class, I notice that before you'll raise your hand, you'll look around and scan the classroom and see, is it safe to raise my hand? Is it not safe? Are others thinking what I'm thinking? And I don't want them to, I want to kind of beat that, if you will, out of them. I want the original radical thinkers. And that's, by the way, I don't know where it came from, but when I was in college and I was an activist and I was a freedom fighter and lover of America, I was oftentimes one of the sole students who would stand up to my professors who said egregious things about America.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't afraid to stand up and be that sole person in the room. I think we need more sole people in the room to do these kinds of things.
Amen.
Thank you for sharing that, and for this message of sometimes, it's not even just, the tools and the tips and the techniques for effective communication, but to first of all ground it in that courage, the courage of your authenticity, the courage to say what you actually think in spite of what everyone else around you might be thinking, the courage to be yourself and to be different. So thank you for sharing that message with
And it's
our
not
audience.
always easy.
And it's not always easy. And it's
No.
true.
It's usually not. I mean, that's why, to your example, I think the default for many humans is to look around and see if it's safe. And so I applaud, especially in education, where so much of the system is towards that conformist impulse that you're trying
Safe
to,
spaces,
right,
right?
that you're trying to teach the opposite.
Now, I'm curious. I really want to ask you this question. We always call this the blue sky question, because it's clearly you've had such a varied background, ability to teach in different settings with so many different kinds of students. So I'm curious your thoughts that if, for example, you had all of the resources, all of the time, the money, everything anyone could ask for, what would you recommend? What have you seen that would be most effective to really help more people develop this courage and have that ability to think differently and speak their truth?
Great question. So if I had unlimited time, resources, so I'm a teacher, right? I'm a writer, I'm a speaker, I'm a teacher. So that's kind of my wheelhouse. That's what I believe in. I love being in the classroom. I love being with my students, but I also am acutely aware that our schools are in trouble. More and more reports are coming out where students in the United States of America are hitting dismally low literacy rates, mathematical literacy, and reading comprehension. And I think it's because, I mean, it's very, very simple. I think that there are X amount of hours in a day. And when you take certain hours from instruction that are meant to build skills, such as the skill of writing a complete sentence and the skill of developing your thought in writing, or the skill, or having a sense of time and place, meaning geography and the chronology of events in history and how the world unfolded. When you take that time away and instead use it for social emotional learning or creating more safe space conversations about feelings, which is fine. That's fine. We could talk about that. But what I'm saying is not at the expense of those hours in the day in school.
Mm-hmm.
When you take those hours out of the day, and it really, really hurts students. So, I mean, in my dream world, I would have my own school, of course.
Mm.
That would be my dream world. But something else I want to, whoever's listening, is I'm a mother, right? And as a mother, I send my child to school, I send my child to camp, I send my child to different places. And oftentimes, as parents, we fall into this trap of thinking, we're going to outsource X to this organization or this institution. I'm going to outsource my son's knowledge of, let's say, history or geography to this school. And then we get all upset. And I think that we need to kind of stop doing that and take back some of that power that we have as parents. And, it's kind of lazy. It is kind of lazy to say, yeah, you know what, I'm going to outsource the Jewish education of my child to the synagogue or this youth movement or this after school program. I think we need to do more as parents. So again, my answer to you is twofold. One, I'm very, very troubled by school today in the sense that I think that our children are reading poorly, writing poorly, have a very bad understanding. It's a digital age of so much information. Everybody has so much information, yet they're so not knowledgeable. So that's concerning. So of course, if I had all the time and money, I would start my own school. But I also want to caution people out there in the sense is there is no perfect school out there. There's no
Mhm.
perfect after school program. You are you are the closest there could be to that perfect solution, which is what you do at home with your kids.
I'd love to ask a follow-up question because I'm really curious. If and
Yes.
when, because I'm going to say when Naya opens up her own school, I think I totally see that that is something you can do. I'm curious, what are some of the things that will definitely be taught at Naya school?
Oh, absolutely the great books of Western civilization. Patriotism. I know it's a crazy thing to say, but I believe that patriotism is missing in our schools. You know, when I used to shop around for schools for my son, I used to ask, well, there were certain questions that I asked. And one question I asked was, do you do the Pledge of Allegiance at your school? And if the school didn't do the Pledge of Allegiance, that for me was a kind of a warning or a signal that maybe this is not the right red flag. Yes, sorry.
Mhm.
And I think that the school that I would found would be deeply indebted um, to the Western civilization, to reading the great books, reading great books because they're great, not because they, you know, check off a certain identity box, because it
Mhm.
was a woman, right? But I don't want my child or or students to read books because they were written by women. I want them to read the best books out there.
Right.
So that's the kind of school I would have. I think the kind of school I would have is also a school where they would learn gratitude towards the United States of America.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
don't know exactly how to do that, how to instill that, but I think that that's also missing in our school. There used to be a time, you know, or maybe that's something that I idealize in the United States of America, where kids who saw a fireman or a policeman or a veteran would come up and say, "Thank you for your service." That's something, you know,
Yeah.
I
I remember
you
that.
know, right? I would love to bring that back, those kinds of holistic values.
Well, and that's a great answer, and it's really um, interesting to hear you get this last one about gratitude for America and patriotism. Joy and I were just having a similar conversation on this topic ourselves about, and it goes part and parcel, I think, ultimately with gratitude for America, but just about the value of freedom as such. And you know, free speech is the eternally radical idea because really freedom is the eternally radical idea. It's certainly still the exception to human uh, organization and human living rather than the norm. So I mean, we take it for granted because it is the norm here in the United States and the West, but even within present 2025 Earth, the West is still a small proportion of all of humanity. I love that, and I could totally see that in Naya's future school. So keep that fire burning. Just we're out of time, but as a final closing part, I smiled earlier when you said "taking back your power" because that's a phrase also that Joy and I use. It's a big part of even our mission at 1776 Forward is not only to be philosophical about freedom and its groundings and its purpose, but then to be action oriented to bring about a greater culture of freedom, which we believe starts with helping people take back their power or find it for the first time. So, I'm as an educator and as one who's clearly thoughtful and proactive in trying to instill better better habits of mind and character to your students. Do you have a kind of summary advice that you give them or that you would give them for people trying to stand up and speak out?
That's a huge question to close out with. Uh, One thing that I teach is something I call activating your antennas. So I have this idea that we all have these antennas on, and these antennas sometimes have become dormant because so the world is always emitting signals, always. And the issue is, can you pick up on those signals? Can you see what the world is communicating to you? And so in my class that I teach, I do teach a class called Propaganda and Literature.
Mm,
And in that class, I teach them what is propaganda and how does the world indoctrinate subtly, very subtly sometimes. So, how to pick up those signals, because you cannot ask people to be courageous if they don't even know what they're looking at. So, you have
Mm.
to first educate people to properly decipher the signals, the codes, and then, how do you, your bigger question that you're asking, I think, is how do you transmit, inspire, teach courage? Um, yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's something I've been always thinking about. I think, and I'm going to say something a bit radical right now. I think that if my parents didn't come from the former Soviet Union, I think that if I was an American Jew who just grew up here several generations, I probably would not be on this podcast with you today. I
Mm.
wouldn't understand how fragile freedom is, how easily it could be taken away, and how humanity doesn't gravitate towards freedom naturally. People
Hmm.
want to be taken care of. Freedom is the antithesis to that, because freedom
Yeah.
says I'm going to take responsibility, and I'm going to take care of myself. I'm not going to outsource it. But that also means the freedom to mess up,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And that's why you want to be
Very
taken care of,
beautiful.
because you lower the likelihood of messing up, because somebody else is going to take care of you.
Right.
Um, and so why do I share this with you? I think that to teach courage, to teach people to stand up, they have to first understand and value what they have and how easily it could be taken away. And I wouldn't have known this if I didn't come from another country where this didn't exist.
Hmm. Wow. Yeah, the historical perspective, even current uh, context of what the alternative ways of living are, especially
Right.
outside of the United States and the Western world. And I think that's a great point. Just, and that goes hand in hand with the gratitude for what you have. So I think that's a wonderful answer. And that does complete our discussion for today. Thank you so much, Naya, for your time and your amazing thoughts and insights. And as always, for all of you out there listening, you can find us on our website, the link to our podcast, 1776forward.com, or on ilvalues.org every 2 weeks under the Dissidents podcast on all major podcast stations as well. See you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.